Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... This weekend, not only am I knocking out another book from my extensive TBR, but I have Connie returning as my special guest because in this episode, we're reviewing the gothic horror novel Taltos by Anne Rice, which this was recommended to us by our good friend Tammy. Now, before I get started, I would like to note that this is considered to be the last book in the trilogy known as The Lives of the Mayfair Witches. However, from my understanding, the Mayfair legacy eventually returns with Rice's later novels, such as Merrick, Blackwood Farm, and Blood Canticle. And while I've heard these titles should be included with the Mayfair trilogy, they are instead lumped in with the Vampire Chronicles, which we will hopefully get to sooner than later. Aside from that, a few months ago, Carrie and I returned to New Orleans to visit some of our favorite cousins, which, upon doing so, we went to pay our respects at the Rice family mausoleum. And as many of you know, in the previous two reviews that Connie and I did for this series, I shared my footage of the First Street house and the house on Amelia Street. So, since we are now at the end of this trilogy, it seems fitting that I share the footage of where Anne and her husband Stan are laid to rest with their daughter Michelle. Despite the gothic nature of Rice's work, we visited the Rice family mausoleum on a very pleasant day, and just being able to stand there, it was something that I cannot put into words. Just being able to be that close to Anne Rice, it was just something that felt very moving. And of course, as you can see, the architecture of this mausoleum is very beautiful. On the back, there are some poems that her husband Stan Rice had written. And so if you ever get the chance to go there, be sure just to focus on these poems and take them in and just be able to enjoy the moment and the solitude that you can experience here. And of course, as you can see, this is set in a very beautiful area. Needless to say, since the camera doesn't do the Rice family mausoleum justice, if you're ever in New Orleans, do yourself a favor and be sure to visit the Metairie Cemetery, as it truly is an experience. But anywho, now that you've been caught up to speed with everything, it's time to see what's been new with Connie.
Hi everyone! I am so glad to be back, and I am ready to discuss all things Taltos. Pretty much everything's the same with me, work, home, taking care of Ben, which I would like to point out that Ben just celebrated his 9th birthday. So,
Happy birthday, Ben!
And now he is on summer break living a good life. And that's pretty much what's been going on in my world.
Awesome. Well, before we move on, we would like to add that we buddy read this with our good friend Tammy, our online friend Hanny, and my husband Carrie, which, as always, we had a lot of great discussions in regards to character, theme, and plot. And if any of you are watching, we hope you enjoy this review. Also, this should go without saying, but if you haven't read the first two books in this series, you don't need to watch this review, because we're going to reveal some things that would ruin your experience with The Witching Hour and Lasher. So if that's the case, come back here after reading those, and then we can talk. But as for now, without us taking up any more of your time, let's return to New Orleans and see what's been new in the magical world of the Mayfair Witches. Taltos by Anne Rice takes place a month or so from where Lasher left off, and it opens up by introducing a man named Ash, who not only is the owner of a multi-million-dollar toy company, but he's the same Taltos from centuries ago who had been known as King Ashlar of Dunlaith.
After his brief introduction, the storyline switches over to Rowan and Michael, Whereas they try to move forward from the traumas that they have survived, they are struck with another tragedy, as one of their loved ones have been murdered.
Meanwhile, as the Mayfairs have been hit with bad news, Ash receives a call from a longtime friend named Sam. And during his call, Sam explains Ash must come to London at once because he has rescued a man named Yuri from a Talamasca member who was trying to kill him.
In response, since Ash has always admired the Talamasca and he is in complete shock that they would harm anyone, he goes to London so he can gain the full story. Upon doing so, he learns from Yuri everything that had occurred over the last year with the Mayfairs and the Talamasca, and after gaining that information, Ash dedicates himself to help eliminate the corruption that's going on within the order.
Eventually, after a subplot reveals that Mona is pregnant with Michael's baby, fate unites Yuri, Ash, Michael, and Rowan, which, during their time together, Ash shares his backstory, where they learn of his existence in a time before Eden. Furthermore, as he educates them on his tribe, they learn of how the Taltos migrated from an island to Britain, where after becoming settled, they were caught in a war of religious persecution.
Also, while a previous history had been given on King Ashley by word of mouth and fabricated texts, Ash's telling brings a deeper understanding to what the Taltos had suffered.
Yet, as this team is preoccupied, Mona's pregnancy has advanced at an accelerated speed, and due to her befriending a relative named Mary Jane, whose side of the family has kept to themselves, Mona is rushed away to the dilapidated mansion in the Louisiana bayou called Fontevraud.
Once here, Mary Jane and her grandmother Dolly Jean will help Mona deliver what they call a walking baby, which upon this birth taking place, the Taltos will be granted the possibility to at last repopulate.
And even though Lasher wanted to spawn an army of Taltos so his kind could eliminate the human race, could humans and Taltos coexist under the right leadership? Taltos was published in 1994 and it debuted at number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list, where it remained in that placement for the total of 5 weeks. Its first printing consisted of 600,000 copies. Upon its release, Publishers Weekly wrote, pulsing with a persistent sense of foreboding, the novel is soggy with meandering atmospheric prose that verges on softcore porn. And the Chicago Tribune wrote, because this is a novel that is empty of style and color, it is turgid with story. It is a cat's cradle of unrealized characters, 25 or so stick figures who say things and disappear, and not only are never vivid, but are also never described. In a 1995 Rolling Stone interview, Rice explained the Mayfair Witch series, particularly the book Taltos, was challenging and demanding to write. In The Witch's Companion by Katherine Ramsland, which was written with Rice's cooperation, Rice noted that the Taltos is to embody the interrelationship of good and evil, and that she was interested by the opposed elements, and that she usually didn't create pure opposites who interacted as such. She added that under this circumstance, the tension between opposites is not a violent clash. Rather, it is a mixture in each individual character of masculine and feminine, good and evil. Also, it was noted that the actual name Taltos is from Carlo Ginzburg's book Ecstasies, Deciphering the Witch's Sabbath, where Ginzburg described a Hungarian sect of sorcerers called Taltos, who claimed that God created them to combat evil witches. Rice said, at the time she responded to the word and liked it, but she didn't realize how closely the Taltos was related to the Talamasca, which in some cultures, Talamasca translates into witch or shaman. As Rice created her own species with the Taltos, she used some of the traits that Ginsberg established, while adding her own ideas. Rice elaborated that she was inspired in many ways with her creation of the Taltos. Specifically, she explained that there are numerous legends of tall, blonde-haired superior people in Britain. She elaborated that there are legends stating that King Arthur was a giant man, With this in mind, she let her imagination delve deeply into all folklore, myth, and history she could get her hands on. During this time, she read about Highland legends, feuds, ghosts, and monsters. And while she visited Glastonbury, she heard tell of a giant skeleton that was unearthed there, which it was rumored to have been the remains of King Arthur. Also, she became familiar with the legends of Glamis Castle, which she credits this material for her influence on Taltos. Furthermore, Rice added she had always found the concept of a continuous awareness to be very seductive, as there is a great promise of recognition, order, justice, and harmony, and how all suffering, pain, and confusion can be redeemed in a moment of great illumination and understanding.
Facts! Here's some things you might not know about some of the locations Rice mentioned in this trilogy. In Taltos, the dilapidated mansion known as Fauntleroy is mentioned, and in The Witch's Companion by Catherine Ramsland, it's noted that during her childhood, Rice was influenced by two books on Louisiana plantations. These are titled Plantation Parade and Ghost Along the Mississippi. And while Fauntleroy is fictitious, it is a smaller reflection of plantations like Belle Grove or Maidwood. Also, throughout the lives of the Mayfair witches, a red light district known as Storyville is spoken about, which Storyville was an area of New Orleans that was named after Alderman Sidney Story, who had sponsored the district. Here, prostitution had become legalized from 1897 to 1917 with upscale brothels, and during this time it became known as the birthplace of jazz.
Wow, what you said about Storyville was really interesting.
Mhm.
And I mean, it makes total sense that you would be so knowledgeable about a red light district.
Brownie.
So, yes.
What is that supposed to mean?
Oh, I mean, it's no judgments on my end. I just know that you would do anything in the world for a penny. And
A penny is worth less than the manufacturing fees it takes to make one.
oh, that's some shit, ain't it? Anyway, as I you Well, now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoilers segment. And if you haven't read this book before, we're about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you would like to click away, just scroll down to the comments and you'll see a pinned comment at the top with the timestamp in it. If you click on that, it'll direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Do you want to do the next part? You only have 17 seconds to do this, and
Yes, I'll do it.
Oh, okay.
Now you only have 17 seconds to do this, so ready, set, go!
Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, we would like to talk about a few of our favorite moments. And first up is the scene where Stuart dies. Now, leading up to this, Ash met with Sam and Yuri, where Yuri told them everything he knew. Then, once Yuri discovered someone murdered Aaron, he reasoned it was because Aaron knew too much about a female Taltos that a few renegade Talamasca members had kept hidden, and how they had wanted to breed her with Lasher. But since Lasher was killed, Yuri pointed out that these same Talamasca members might try to produce another male Taltos with someone like Mona. Following this, it's revealed that Sam and Ash want the Talamasca to maintain order, because if order isn't kept, it could disturb their privacy. Also, since Ash respected the Talamasca, he wants them to remain at peace and not to interfere. Meanwhile, two Talamasca members named Marklin and Tommy meet with their superior Stuart. And while Stuart is pissed that they had Aaron killed, Marklin reasoned the hit was necessary to protect their silence. In response, Stewart warned them to not underestimate the Talamasca and that they had failed him and the Talamasca by having Aaron killed. Furthermore, he warned them to not cross the Mayfairs. During this time, Ash confronted the Talamasca's superior general, Anton, where he learned the Talamasca elders had sent Marklin and Tommy to bring back a Taltos. After gaining that information, Ash choked out Anton after seeing he would sell out the elders to save himself. While this happened, Yuri called Rowan to update her, and as they considered the suspects responsible for Aaron's death, Stewart's name popped up, even though Yuri didn't think Stewart was guilty. To solve this mystery, Rowan and Michael met with Yuri. Then, once that had come and gone, unbeknownst to Stewart that Yuri communicated with the Mayfairs and a Taltos, he also made plans to meet with Yuri, which he kept his scheduled date after he declined the superior general position that the Talamasca had offered him because he felt unfit for the role. Then, while this happened, Rowan spoke with Ash on the phone where she and Michael agreed to meet him in public. And during their meeting, they saw Yuri and Stewart step out into the street from a nearby building. From here, they kidnap Stewart, who admits he has a female Taltos named Tessa that he wants to breed. So, while using her as leverage to save himself and to potentially see her procreate with Ash, he takes them to meet her. Once at the tower where Tessa has been kept, Stewart leads them to her room. And upon them meeting, Ash points out that she's too old to bear children, which this revelation is absolutely devastating to Stewart because ever since he met Tessa, he believed his purpose for breathing was to see a Taltos reproduce. Well, after they leave Tessa be, they enter another room where Stewart reveals after he had acquired her, at first he didn't realize what she was. But once he discovered she was a Taltos, he established a plan for her to eventually produce a child that could establish a chain of memory. After his confession, he presents a book of documents written by Saint Ashler that he had stolen, which disregards the history of the Taltos. And due to Stewart not knowing who Ash really is, his boasting pisses Ash off because that was the book that Ash had written. Then, to poke the bull even further, Stewart calls Ash an imposter. And as an argument ensues, Stewart pulls a gun from the nearby bookcase with the intent to kill. Yet, before he can do anything, Rowan kills him with her stare. What I really enjoyed about this going down was the fact that before Rowan killed him by using her powers, he was hit with the realization that his purpose for everything was absolutely worthless.
Mm-hmm.
And to just see him gradually unravel under the pressure was so satisfying. Like the whole time he continued forward, I could just feel him doing his damnedest to hold his shit together, which I knew would be impossible. Now, granted, some people might say he needed to suffer a little bit more before he died. However, him being devastated from the news that Tessa couldn't bear children was everything I needed, because I could literally feel him snap inside after all of his hopes and dreams were shattered. Then for him to be so smug to think he could win in a showdown with these particular opponents, that was just pure gold. Like, I nearly cackled out laughing when he pulled the gun because I knew as soon as that happened, his ass was grass.
Next up are the deaths of Marklin and Tommy. So while Stewart led everyone to Tessa, Marklin and Tommy try to play it cool around the Talamasca, and then while they feel that they have outsmarted everyone, they remain concerned that Yuri will contact the mother house to expose them. So despite the possibility of walking into a hornet's nest, they go to the mother house to celebrate the new superior general. But upon arrival, Marklin has a bad feeling, and although he has always trusted his gut, they proceed forward. As they speak with the other Thalamasca members, they learn that no one knows who killed Aaron. Nonetheless, even though this should be reassurance, Marklin's bad feeling remains. Then once at the ceremony, they accept wine and food and continue to act normal. However, after they indulge, they're hustled into a room connected to the dining hall. Once inside, they are shown Stewart's dead body, and when they turn around, they see Yuri is with the Talamasca members. At this point, it's revealed everyone knows Markle and Tommy were responsible for Aaron's death, and Tessa is safe with them. And since there's solid evidence that proves they were guilty, the Talamasca forces them into the basement. From here, they're thrown into a room that's no bigger than an elevator shaft, where Tommy dies in the fall. Then, upon Markland discovering they are surrounded by bones, he cuddles up to Tommy's dead body. Which is at this point he hears the Talamasca members break in the confined space where he will eventually die. I loved this scene because while I didn't know what would happen next, nothing could prepare me for the outcome. Like when they went into the mother house, I knew something was coming to a point because there was too much tension. And when the reveal came where they saw Yuri stand behind them, I had my popcorn, my candy, my drink cheering because I knew whatever was about to go down would be worth it. And Bryce didn't disappoint because their death was brutal. It was what nightmares are made of, and it was truly gothic. Also, I will admit a teeny tiny part of me felt bad when I realized Markland was left to rot, but then I remembered what he and Tommy did to Aaron, not to mention all of his schemes, lies, and manipulating, and I think to myself that this couldn't have happened to a better asshole.
Following that is Ash's backstory. So, after everything went down with Stuart, Ash shares his story with Rowan and Michael because he wants to gain their love. And in his telling, he explains that the Taltos existed before Eden. All Taltos are born knowing the history of their past and basic knowledge. Loud noises hurt them, and music can paralyze them. Furthermore, they can detect witches and other Taltos by sight or scent. Also, while their home was a tropical paradise that was primarily peaceful, there was the rare occasion that a Taltos would commit a crime. In turn, these criminals were sent to Britain by a boat and were left there to freeze as they couldn't tolerate the cold. So, overall, the Taltos were playful and mostly died by accident. They were naturally obedient and agreeable, and until human blood mixed with them, there was ever hardly any rebellion. And as far as spirituality was concerned, they did believe in an entity that could be a good god and or goddess, and an entity that could be the opposite of that goodness. Then, one day, a volcano erupted on their island, and they were forced to evacuate to Britain. After relocating, their laws had become very strict, where execution became the ultimate punishment for disobedience. And upon becoming established in their new habitat, they made protective stone circles where they gave birth. As time passed, the memories of their children changed, and they heard tales of how barbaric humans were, which eventually they were invaded by these humans, and they were forced to take refuge in Dunlaith. But unfortunately, these humans knew the power that music had over the Taltos, and they used it against them, which, due to how they were treated, eventually the Taltos realized that in order to survive, they needed to exterminate the humans, and they believed they could succeed by rapid procreation. Following that, the Taltos were captured by the humans, where they were used for breeding and ritualistic sacrifice. In turn, young Taltos became more warlike, and aside from the atrocities brought on them by the humans, the little people entranced them with music so they could be used to produce tall offspring. Also, witches believed if they drank the blood of a Taltos, they could gain their power. From here, the years passed and Christianity was on the rise. And as this time period progressed, a group of monks introduced their teachings of Christ to the Taltos. Then, upon learning of Christ, Ash felt like Christ had the morals of the Taltos, which caused Ash to fall in love with the Gospels. At this point, Ash and his sons converted to Christianity, and the monks then tried to convert the other Taltos. But while the conversion was almost a success, Ash's wife Janet condemned the new religion as lies, and she pointed out inconsistencies. Upon her bringing this to their attention, 1/3 of the Taltos refused to convert, and they declared war if they were forced. Nonetheless, the Christians killed those who refused to convert, and while Ash protested, the Christians burnt Janet at the stake to set an example. So, after that, Ash and the Taltos who didn't convert ran and hid. The Christians built a church in the glen and concocted the story of Saint Ashlar as leverage to continue converting pagans into Christians. Personally, I felt like Ash's history was the best part of this book because it really went into perspective on how peaceful the Taltos were, and it made me feel a deeper level of sorrow for them. Also, it was interesting to see how what really happened to Janet and Ash was so very different from what was documented or shared by word of mouth. And it shows how the church will bend the truth to fit their narrative. So, with this in mind, it was really interesting to see how the Taltos went from point A to B and how they eventually faded into myth no differently than witches or the little people. And I feel like without this insight, Ash's life or the ending of this book might not have been as impactful.
And last is the end scene. Now, leading up to this, Mona gave birth to Morgan at Fauntleroy, so Mary Jane's grandmother Dolly Jean could assist with the birth. And since Mona assumes that Michael and Roman think all Taltos are evil, she plans to keep Morgan in secret. Also, since she thinks Michael and Roman will be out of the country for the next 2 days, she and Mary Jane return to the First Street house with Morgan to form a game plan. But little do they know at that very moment, Pierce is picking up Rowan and Michael from the airport. Meanwhile, as Rowan and Michael are completely oblivious to regards to what's waiting for them when they return home, they see Mona, Mary Jane, and Morgan. And before the initial shock can wear off, Mona freaks out and she reveals Morgan is Michael's child and they can't hurt her. From there, Morgan smells ash from Rowan and Michael and she begs for them to tell her where he is. After that, in private, Michael and Rowan debate if it's right for them to spend their lives keeping Morgan and Ash apart. Shortly thereafter, Dolly Jean arrives at the First Street house and helps them rationalize the circumstance, and they eventually decide that in time they will reveal Ash's identity to Morgan. Well, after 5 days pass, Ash wonders if Rowan and Michael have received the gifts he mailed them earlier that week. So, to satisfy his curiosity, he goes to their home in New Orleans, which upon his arrival he sees Morgan through the window of the First Street house, and within that split second they immediately connect and Morgan runs through the window and leaps into his arms. Then as Michael and Rowan bid them farewell, they run off together where the book indicates they have run off to Donlade to possibly repopulate. Everything about this and leading up to it I enjoyed. Like, I don't know why, but when Rowan and Michael saw Morgan, I couldn't stop laughing. I mean, think about it. Here they are, returning home from their trip and about to get busy, then bam! They're faced with yet another Taltos. And the thing is, it's not just any Taltos, but it's Michael's daughter. Like, if What the Fuck had a picture in the dictionary, it would be their faces. Here they thought it was over, and now they're like, here we go again. It was great. It was great. But in all fairness, though, they did regroup and handle it the best that they could, considering Mona was a 13-year-old who had Michael's baby. And at least the book ended on what could possibly be a happy note with Morgan running off with Ash. Which I like to think that they could repopulate with a positive outcome versus how Lasher wanted an army to rise to exterminate all human beings. So with that in mind, I like to think that eventually humans and Taltos could coexist and the past not repeat itself.
We would like to take this opportunity to bitch. Hit it, Picky.
I would like to bitch about those two little village idiots, otherwise known as Tommy and Markland. Y'all, these two misguided fools really thought that they were going to have Aaron killed and get away with it. But nope, not in this little lifetime, little dumbass assholes. Like, picture it. These morons have been running around with that fool Stewart like a gaggle of egotistical basic bitches thinking they were going to revive the Taltos and gain knowledge or some shit when they lost the plot and went rogue. Every moment of these doofuses were just blithering as they ran around lying, manipulating, killing, leaving havoc in their wake. Hell, they even manipulated correspondence with the elders as a part of their scheme. And baby, let me tell you, when these two dumbasses got dropped in that hole like yesterday's trash, I laughed my little ass off because they got exactly what they deserved. God don't, the Master don't play, and I love that. So sleep tight, you little bitches. Don't let the bed buzz bite.
I would like to take this opportunity to bitch about that skeezy old bastard named Stuart. Now, old Dribble Lip here may not have wanted Aaron to die, and it seems like he was ready to have a conniption fit when his two jackasses informed him of their poor decision. However, he made himself an alibi when he was like, keep calm and carry on. Also, not to mention he had poor Tessa stashed away like some Rapunzel, and granted, he claimed that he did not keep her as a prisoner against her will because she was scared of society to start with. But riddle me this, if he's so damn altruistic, how come his sorry ass never encouraged her to have a life beyond her confines? So yeah, total skeezy old bastard.
Yeah.
And then when this Woody Allen jerk-off revealed his purpose was to see the Taltos procreate, I felt like the last thing his sorry ass deserved was to catch the drips by watching a different species make whoopee. And he can say that his purpose was for research, it was for documentation, or for knowledge. He can say that all he wants. But my fat gay ass was like, bullshit. The old perv ain't nothing but a skank nasty. Taltos feels like the positive balance to the dread and constant intensity that its predecessors established, especially when it came down to the end.
And while we are presented with the same protagonist from the previous books, this installment introduces a few new characters who we felt added to the development of the Mayfair Witches and the Talamasca.
Also, as far as themes are concerned, this book focuses on subjects such as Christianization, organizational structure, relational crisis, and more importantly, free choice, which this last topic seems to be the overall focus of this series. Character-wise, I feel like Michael and Rowan's story is over. They survived conflict and became changed persons because of it. And due to how their story played out, I feel like all of their loose ends are tied up well enough, and now it's time to move on. Which, in my opinion, if they can survive all of this and remain a couple, they aren't going to get a divorce anytime soon. However, Carrie said since he was still bitter towards Rowan after her actions betrayed him as a reader in the first book, he could totally see Rowan flake out on Michael for someone else.
I could totally understand why Carrie feels that way because her decisions in the first book made me want to shade some sense into her. But at this point, I think they're together for good. Or if Rowan does up and leave Michael again, I'm fairly sure he would wait for her.
Now, as far as the new characters are concerned, I absolutely hated the antagonist, and I was so very pleased to see them get their comeuppance. And among the new protagonists, Ash was everything I wish Lasher could have been in life. Aside from him, Mary Jane and her grandmother Dolly Jean were fun introductions to the Mayfairs, as they were both loving and they were full of just nothing but bubbly Southern personality.
Yeah, I'm glad the antagonists got their karma, and I really feel like they were deserving of what came their way. Also, I love Mary Jane and Dolly Jean because they were just so full of life, and they were the type of relatives that I would want to hang around.
And even though this wasn't a living being, I love the character of the sinking mansion known as Fontevraud. Like, its description was rich, even though it was dilapidated, and it truly felt like the type of home that I would expect a swamp witch to live in. And personally, I know this sounds absolutely insane, but I kind of wish I lived there, despite the fact that half of it was underwater.
Right.
Theme-wise, similar to Lasher's backstory, Ash's history details how the church Christianized pagans. And since we explored this subject in our review for Lasher, we would practically be repeating ourselves here if we explored that subject again. So, moving on.
Another main focus of this book is the importance of maintaining order. And while last year briefly introduced the idea of corruption within groups or organizations that are intended to be non threatening, Taltos explores that subject further. For example, we have antagonists like Stewart, Markland, and Tommy, as well as a couple of others who go against the Telemasco's rule to only observe and document, which, because of their actions, innocent people die while one individual had been secretly kept in captivity.
To be perfectly honest, while the Talamasca renegades were starting to act up in Lasher, at that time I was a little unclear if what occurred in that book was due to the decisions collectively made by the Talamasca
Mm-hmm.
or if it was because of just a few individuals. But in Taltos, I discovered only a small number of Talamasca members went against the Order's laws for their own personal gain and interest. And as this unfolded, I saw how easy an individual or small demographic can misuse the power that they maintain.
Which, due to how Rice felt about the Catholic Church, although the Talmasca wasn't Catholic, it was a good call on her behalf to use this type of dishonesty with some of its members. Because due to how these renegades are depicted, we're reminded that no matter how benevolent any organization might be, there will always be the bad apple or apples that tarnishes its reputation.
However, unlike most organizations that turn the other cheek, such as what we have seen with the Catholic Church and its ongoing sexual abuse, we see that the Talamasca isn't the kind of order to turn the other cheek. And because of this, we're reminded that all actions have consequences.
Mhm.
And eventually, your bad deeds will catch up with you.
On that same note, the importance of order is also relevant with the Taltos. For example, although they are primarily a benevolent group of beings who live life to the fullest, there is still the rare occasion now renegade Taltos rises, such as what we saw with Lasher. And similar to the Talamasca, when a Taltos threatens the harmony that their tribe established, they are dealt with to ensure their protection.
Also, in regards to the Taltos, their order is disrupted when they evacuated to Britain, as they had to establish stricter laws. Then, another event that destroys their order even more is when the monks tried to Christianize them. Which, as a side note, this event shows how religion causes division and bloodshed.
But due to how a few renegades are portrayed in comparison to the rest of the organization or group that they represent, this brings into perspective how one bad apple shouldn't spoil the bunch, especially if the majority of that group or organization isn't fueled with selfishness or malicious intent.
Another subject that comes into play is relational crisis, which in Taltos, after Michael and Rowan are reunited, we see their relationship has taken a toll that they might never fully recover from.
Mhm.
For example, when they tried to have sex, they were met with dysfunction, which this is understandable considering everything the two of them went through with infidelity, rape, and abuse in general.
Also, due to an outburst that Rowan had, it's fairly obvious that she developed PTSD because during one scene she reacted as if Michael was going to hit her, when abuse isn't in his nature, nor did he do anything to indicate he was going to attack.
Other than the sexual abuse Rowan suffered, there are other conflicts that Rowan and Michael are enduring as a couple, which this includes the affair Michael had with Mona, as well as Rowan wanting to exclude Michael from meeting Ash. And granted, these subjects don't remain unresolved, as Rowan sets ground rules with Mona, and Michael says he won't tolerate Rowan leaving him again.
So it's safe to say that with everything that has happened or is happening, their relationship in a short amount of time has suffered some pretty serious trials and tribulations that they may never possibly recover from.
And last is the topic of free choice, which this is primarily seen by how everyone has the ability to do good or bad. Now, this subject is fairly strong with the Taltos, as we have Ash, who, like Lasher, has suffered at the hands of the Christian Church. However, unlike Lasher, who was hell bent on exacting his revenge against humanity, Ash simply wanted to coexist.
Mhm.
And while it could be argued that they suffered two different types of religious trauma caused by the humans, what they decide to do afterwards compares the actions of positive and negative.
And by having this comparison, we see where Ash had the ability to grow and prosper, whereas Lasher potentially had the same opportunity had he played his card right. Also, on that note, this of course leads to how our choices pave the road ahead to either make life better or worse.
Overall, Taltos didn't scare me, creep me out, or gross me out. But in my opinion, it wrapped up everything enough where I felt like I have closure. And the point of the series did make a strong impact.
Yeah, it didn't really scare me or creep me out or gross me out or anything, but the plot did keep me on my toes.
While Taltos by Anne Rice isn't my favorite of the series, and at first I felt like the book was simply unnecessary, after sitting with it, I understand why it played out the way it did. With that said, I truly did enjoy Ash's backstory and the history that we gained on the Taltos. But to be honest, my only one complaint about this book is how Rice killed a lovable character off page. Which I point this out because, due to how invested I was with that character, since Rice didn't show that character's death, I feel like I was robbed of the opportunity to mourn for that person.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, had she taken a note from The Witching Hour or Lasher, this character's death could have easily been impactful. But at the end of the day, although I feel like parts of this book could have been a little bit stronger, I did enjoy the overall effect. And if you need answers to what happened in the previous books, then Taltos will provide those answers for you.
I felt like this was a good summer read and that Taltos was filled with more drama and suspense rather than actual horror, which I didn't expect, but I'm fine with. So at the end of the day, I definitely recommend Taltos because it was a fun, informative experience I suggest you buddy read with friends.
All right, Connie. Well, as always, it was good to have
It
you.
was great to be back. Thank you for having me.
And of course, the next time we're going to buddy read, I'm actually going to veer away from my TBR, but we are planning to read and review I Know What You Did Last Summer since the new movie is coming out. And so we've always been fans of I Know What You Did Last Summer, and we're excited for the new movie.
Yes.
We have also never read the book before, but what we're going to do is Connie is going to read the new version because we've heard there's some updated parts to the book, and I'm going to read the old version, and we are going to compare notes to see if there's really any major differences. So we are hoping to do that maybe in July.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we will see you again.
I will be back.
And of course, I hope you have a great week.
You too.
Thank you. And let's get started on that next read.
Yes.
Well, now that we're at the end of this episode, I hope everyone had a great time. And if you would like to follow me on social media, links are available in the description section of this episode, as well as links to my Patreon and also where you can become a member to this channel. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell, as I do have more book reviews coming in the near future. So until we see each other again, I hope you have a great weekend and sweet nightmares.